Hello and welcome to the Little Minds Big Ideas podcast with the Early Years Network. We're back.
We are.
Monday morning again. We missed a week. We were up a bit late, but
Technically, it was up late. We didn't miss the day.
no, but we're back now Monday morning with you all.
We're back.
We are going to be discussing another early years topic.
We are.
today.
We're going to be covering the foundational piece of everything we do.
So positive relationships, positive attachments, security, whatever you want to call it. They are the foundation for everything that we do in early childhood.
I don't think we just call it security.
Positive security. Feeling secure and safe.
Get security in here. This child is not feeling positive right now.
No, you know what I meant. Being secure and safe through positive relationships.
Like I always say, I always use the analogy of a house.
Yeah.
You've got to start with the foundations, because if you start building the swanky lounges and the bedrooms, before you've built the foundations, it's going to fall down.
It's all going to go wrong. Yeah.
It's all going to work.
You've got to get those foundations in. And in early childhood, those positive relationships are the foundation.
The creme de la creme. No, actually, the creme de la creme is normally the last bit, isn't it?
The foundations. We'll go with foundations.
It always reminds me of, who sings Foundations? Kate Nash.
Yeah. You like that one?
It's one of your favourite songs, isn't it?
Yeah, I like that song.
Yeah. Go on.
No. Nobody needs to hear that. So, do you want to explain how we're going to break it down?
Yeah, so we've broken it down to three sort of areas. So first of all, we're going to cover why positive relationships are so important, what they mean, how they kind of proliferate into other areas of early years. Then we're going to look at ways in which we can help build and develop positive relationships and sort of our role as practitioners, early years educators, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then finally, we're going to look at some
barriers.
I kept saying blockages, boundaries. We're going to look at some barriers and pitfalls that could potentially be impacting us when it comes to building positive relationships. Now, we are not going to cover the whole breadth of this topic. I have got a class coming up, and it's in the makings. We're cooking up in the background, which will go into a hell of a lot more detail than this. This is literally, we're going to pick of the 10 points or 12 points we've got for all of these areas. We're going to pick a couple that we think are probably the most important and worthy of talking our time. But I'll go into so much more detail in a class that will come out.
As much as I love sitting and chatting to you, we've got other things I need to do today, so I just can't sit here all day and talk for everything.
No, and otherwise
we'll do all of that with you on his class.
Otherwise, it's going to become
a teaser.
It'll become a class if we're not careful.
It will. So this is like a little teaser, little spark for conversation, I think.
Yeah, I am. FYI, I am full of cold, so if you hear me coughing, sneezing, I do apologise.
I'm beginning with it, so apologies from the two of us this morning with you. So positive relationships, why they're so important. I think one that stands out for me is, I'm going to go to our second point of social skills. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
I think that children having positive relationships really helps develop those social skills, because if you feel safe and secure in the people that are around you, or at least one person that you're with, your confidence and things like that is able to, it skyrockets a little bit, because you feel more content in where you are, because you've got that secure person or secure base with you.
Yeah. And I think as well, it's not just about learning, having the confidence to do social skills. It's also learning social skills. So if you've got those positive relationships, we're going to talk a lot about role modelling and the importance of role modelling. And this is a perfect example of it when we talk about social skills, because you learn the norms of society, how to fit in, how to act. And you see this as being a social phenomenon and learn it, because we all have different cultures, different backgrounds, and different norms and ways of doing things. You can go to another country, maybe in the Middle East, Asia, wherever your background, Africa, and it can be quite jarring sometimes. You think people are rude or this, but it's just a different way of living. It's just a different social norm. I mean, think about it. In England, handshakes. But then you go to parts of Asia and it's different, isn't it? It's sort of like bow a little bit, and it's that thing. I remember when I first went to Thailand, I went to shake someone's hand. It was like, what are you doing? So you sort of learn different people's customs, and that's where it all starts in the early years.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, those social skills and having those relationships to learn from is really important. We've said we'll talk about role modelling later. So I think that's a big one. And the other big one, I think, is the emotional development that it provides for children.
Yeah, because obviously my class came out in co-regulation a few weeks ago. It's huge in terms of developing those positive relationships. If children can feel first of all secure in those relationships. They've got that felt security. They've got that emotional security. So then they can learn from you in a co-regulated state, and they can gain those interactions, experiences.
It's also that if you have a positive relationship with someone, you feel that vulnerability of being emotional and expressing yourself is okay, because you know that it doesn't matter how you're feeling, you can express that to someone you feel close to or you feel safe with, and that goes for children and adults.
Yeah. And you learn skills even such as like empathy. You know, where does that come from? You learn it from others.
Yeah.
And the skills such as that.
Yeah, because when you begin to build those positive relationships, you build care for others as well. And when you feel care, you say you learn those empathetic skills that you wouldn't learn without that person to feel empathy for.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think that's really important when we come to positive relationships, because children need to feel that sense of security and also learn what emotional regulation is, how to express themselves in the right way, in a safe way. And you can do that when you've got a positive relationship with a peer, an adult, a friend, like whatever that may be for them, a parent, things like that.
I think for me, the biggest factor, because when you're talking about positive relationships, you could literally pick anything within the EYFS, the early years curriculum, anything we do in early years, and you can come back and draw a line from positive relationships and set how that sets
My
that up.
class on independence has a whole lesson on why positive relationships impact independence. So it literally is everywhere.
But I think the most important thing that comes from it is that trust and that security, because it's through that trust and security that then enables them to have the confidence to go and do other things. You know, we talk about exploring their own curiosity, in their own inquiry, you know, free learning, exploration, delving into things from a cognitive and education point of view. You can't do any of that if you are, I don't know, just use the word scared, but apprehensive, nervous, all those, anxiety. If you've got all those things within you, you're not going to want to expose yourself or challenge yourself to do certain things because you're then scared of judgment or others' opinions. I mean, same with adults. If you work in a work environment where if you expose yourself by providing your opinion, by doing something else out of the norm, you know, exiting this sort of barrier, the shield you put up around yourselves, if you feel if you did that, there'll be a negative consequence to it, you're anxious about it, you're not going to do that. And as a result, in the work environment, you're not going to perform your best, are you?
Yeah. And you're not going to push yourself to do more or go further. And it's the same for children. If they've not got that secure base, they don't trust the environment they're in, they won't take risks and they won't engage in something new, or they won't suggest a song, or they won't choose a story. Like there's those things, they won't express their own opinions and interests in the same way as if they felt that the people around them won't judge them for it. And I think that's something that's really important in early years, is that when children need to learn humour, of course they do, but children will also pick up on jokes that you're making.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for adults as well, because we might think that we're making a funny joke about something a child does and they laugh with us, but there's different ways of doing it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So we need to learn humour, but then also don't take it too far where a child then feels humiliated, which can happen because you don't think the child understands or you don't think the child is listening, but actually you could really be damaging that trust that they had in you, and that positive relationship can start to break. Yeah.
But that's humour can often be one of the biggest destroyers of relationships, because what you think's funny, someone else can be quite hurtful, and that's the same as adults as well.
And I think, like I say, children need to learn humour, and some children do really get humour. They are really funny and they can make sarcastic comments, or they can say, when you say, oh, I'm drawing an elephant and it's a flower, they can go, no, it's not. Like they get it, whereas some children don't. And some children don't understand sarcasm and humour. So you have to make sure that when you're talking to children and you've got those secure relationships, that you're not going to damage them through unwanted banter or
sarcasm. I think is actually quite confusing for children.
Yeah.
Especially if they haven't got a grip with the actual meaning of things yet. So you start throwing sarcasm in it.
And that's why you do it based on the individual child, because like I said, some children do get it. And some children in preschools are really switched on and are actually really funny because they understand how to make other people laugh. Because I think that comes from, though, having secure relationships and being confident and feeling in a safe environment to make those jokes as well.
We'll always come back to sport, because we often talked about, never labelled it when we're playing sport as having positive relationships and things like that, but it's to do with confidence.
Yeah.
And I remember, like in cricket, for example, if you're a batsman, you can often get yourself into like a bit of a rut. And if you're overthinking, I'm going to lose my place or whatever else because actually I'm not performing well, you're not going to perform well.
No.
The pressure of that nature very rarely is a positive thing. Sorry. But when you have that freedom to go and in this example, play your normal game, you have that confidence because you know other people aren't going to be talking about it behind your back, they're supporting you, etc., you then have the time and the ability to find your best performances and find that consistency.
Yeah.
And children are the same. If you provide them with an environment where they can make mistakes, they can get things wrong, they can learn from failure, that in itself is promoting a really, really healthy, and that all starts with the relationships we build. And
that links to one of our other points of self-esteem. Because
I love at the start of this, we're going to only go through a point, and then we're just motoring through them.
So everyone, you might be listening to us.
But no, you're right. Self-esteem's huge.
Yeah, but just really quickly, like when you feel safe, you've got those positive relationships and you've got people like building you up in a positive way, it does build your self-esteem. And you can only really feel that from someone you're close with. I know even as an adult, like when your close friends hype you up or make you feel good about something that's going on or that you've done, it really boosts your self-confidence. So I think that is really important in terms of
it links really well.
Self-esteem.
It links really well to a term called self-efficacy, where it's about how you view yourself.
I just that because I won't be able to say it.
How you view yourself in relation to others.
Yeah.
And if you've got negative self-efficacy, your own self-worth in retrospect of other people and what they can achieve, you sort of down yourself like, I can't do that. Little Jimmy's really good at running and jumping, but I'm not. Whereas you want to build that positive self-efficacy of how you value yourself. And even if you're realistic and you know that, I'm not Usain Bolt, I can't go run that, but there's things I can do really well that Usain Bolt probably can't. And do you know what I mean? Like you build that self-efficacy of yourself.
Usain Bolt wants to get in touch and tell us what he can't do to make us all feel a bit better. That'd be great. Okay.
Well, actually, after seeing him play football in Australia, I think I might be better than him.
Well, there you go.
I haven't quite got that. I haven't got that head start that he has. But also he's got a terrible first touch. So what can we do, Emily? What can we do? How do we build positive relationships?
What can't we do? Okay. I think one that sticks out for me, I'm just looking at our little list here.
Choose one.
Is the modelling of positive behaviours.
Yeah.
That is huge, and that is something that I always talk about. I was in a class where I talked about it, and I can't remember which one it is, but I talk about the fact that what you do and how you talk to colleagues and how you talk to parents and how you talk to the other adults around you is going to be a massive impact. And it is how children will start to view how they should talk to other people.
Yeah.
There's always the thing of parents will say, they laid their dolls down and they patted them on the back to go to sleep because that's what you're doing in an earlier setting. They're picking up on that. Whereas if you weren't doing that and you're just letting children, just ignoring them when they're upset, that's what they're going to pick up on.
Yeah.
So it's all of those modelling of positive communication, positive interactions, being friendly. Don't roll your eyes when people say something you don't agree with. Because children will start to, when they don't want to listen to you, go, and they will do it. So modelling the positive relationships that you expect from others, it's the saying of treat people the way you'd want to be treated. And I think that's really important with positive relationships and how we can build them with children.
I mean, from a scientific standpoint, we at this point in time understand that, I'm not going to go into percentages, but there is a mixture of biological and environmental. That's what makes a human being. So if we understand that, and that's the way we look at it, we understand that children biologically are born differently. Some have a greater capacity for learning, for cognitive skills such as concentration. Athletically, some will be more athletic than others. Like, we're not all born the same. Like, it's not an even game. Yes, exactly. So biologically is a big difference, but also then environmentally, and especially in those first 5 years, has a massive impact.
Yeah.
You could be the smartest, most intelligent child ever biologically when you're born, but if you're in an abusive first 5 years, your brain structure will change, your brain will shrink in areas, your amygdala will be higher, you'll be more stressed, anxious, and then that will have a really toxic effect on your brain through toxic stress. And all these things show that one thing isn't more important than the other. You might biologically be born to be really clever or really athletic and gifted in certain ways, but your environment will also shape you. You're born almost with a blank canvas, and some canvases are bigger and more impressive and better paper necessarily when you're born, but you can still produce, an incredible work of art on the side of a street wall.
Yeah.
That's a weird analogy, I get it, but I sort of thought of Banksy, I guess. But what I'm trying to say is biologically, it is not capped there. It's the environment and the experiences you have that make a huge difference.
Yeah.
And a lot of it boils down to those relationships that you have in those first few years, your secure attachments, whatever you want to label it, are massive, absolutely huge. Because we've established at this point, we are social learners. We learn from our experiences. We learn socially, and especially in those few years. When we talk about later learning and we talk about academic stuff and we talk about learning to be a doctor and things like that, a lot of that comes down to memory function, your ability to recall things that you take in.
Yeah.
The educational side and learning the norms of society and learning your cognitive abilities, that concentration skill that doctor needs later on in life, some of it's biological, some of it's for experience. Yeah. And I think it's understanding that relationships are that pinnacle of that.
Another one is consistency and predictability. Children need that routine and the consistent routines. If they know what's coming and they know what to expect and they know, right, okay, well, I've had lunch and now I'll do this. Like, they know what's coming. They automatically feel more, I don't know, they feel secure because everything around them is more stable.
Yeah, I mean, routines are vital probably in sort of two areas. First area is co-reg on or self-regulation as a whole, because often routine moments in time when you're switching in those routine moments is often where we see triggers and that emotional triggers in the day. And one, it's a brilliant opportunity for learning and helping children through co-regulation. And two, it's an area that you want to try and streamline as much as possible so children aren't getting triggered and we're not causing children that upset. And then secondly, often when you look at Ofsted reports, it is those routines where we are not taken advantage of from a learning capacity, and they often are rushed and we're putting people in stress. I mean, we had a comment the other day on social media saying that I can't do anything like that because I've got 13 2-year-olds and I'm out of ratio and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. So, I mean, if that's the case, then obviously that's crazy, and you need to look at that and reflect upon your routines and stuff. Yeah. Because, an environment like that and a situation like that, especially when it comes to feeding, you shouldn't be that vulnerable.
No.
And like we say, those routinal moments are huge for learning, whether it be independence, cognitive, whatever it might be.
And it's true in those routines that we talk about, that support we give children, the encouragement for them to try new things, or, I don't know, encourage them to take part in something different, whatever that looks like, or explore their environment. And through those secure relationships is where children are going to feel more confident and boost their self-esteem to do those things.
And this sort of links into setting boundaries, because that's another area, because setting boundaries is huge, especially when it comes to positive relationships. So then children know where they stand. You're delivering a consistency. I always relate it back to adults. We all have our contracts of employment. We all have our policies and procedures. It just provides us with an infrastructure that we know where we stand when it comes to our professional relationships with other people. We know what's, for our job descriptions, we know what's expected of us. Obviously, it's not a finite list of things that we do day to day, but it gives you a really clear understanding of what is expected of you, bottom letter. Yeah. And it's the same with children, by having those boundaries in place.
Children need to learn, like we talked before about social norms. They need to learn, unfortunately, they do need to learn the word no.
Yeah.
Things don't just get given to you as an adult. And I would never want a child to leave a setting thinking that the world is just going to be handed to them, because that's not reality. You have to work for it, and you have to experience disappointment to be able to deal with it.
It's a major step in co-regulation.
Yeah, but setting those boundaries with secure relationships is easier, because if you've got a secure relationship and you feel confident communicating with the child, and the child feels confident confiding in you, when you say no and you have to be a bit firmer and put your foot down, they can understand, and then it's not a surprise that, okay, like, I have to deal with this, and we can move forward together through co-regulation.
Yeah.
But it's that positive relationship that helps them to be okay with it and help them to face whatever the disappointment is for them.
To develop into a healthy adult, you have to suffer disappointment, upset, sadness, along the lines, and then that's where the positive relationship kicks in.
Yeah.
Because you have that relationship, and through co-regulation, you have the ability to help them through it and understand that
exactly.
right now you feel upset or you're disappointed, but it's not the end of the world. And through these methods of actually looking at the positive side, through relaxation methods, whatever that independent child contextually is upset about or how they react to it, it's about assisting them through that and providing them with strategies to do that. I think...
Do one more?
I think I'm going to chuck together a couple and just talk about how being present is so big. Yeah. Whether we talk about listening, whether we talk about engaging with play, just being present and there is so meaningful, and sharing joyful experiences and sharing happiness together really connects people, regardless of age, whether you're talking about a 5-year-old connecting with a 38-year-old or two 38-year-olds. Do you know what I mean? Like that shared moments of happiness. And also being present, like really present in the moment.
Build a relationship without being there and sharing experiences. Relationships are built on shared experiences. So if you're present in the moment with that child, they're going to appreciate the time that you're spending together and like treasure those moments. So yeah, when you want to build relationships, being present and being in the moment and talking to them and listening to what they have to say and taking into account what they have to say and respecting what they want to do, taking their ideas on board, what they want to do, but then also teaching them to do that back to you is really, really important for mutual respect in a relationship.
Yeah. 'Cause at the end of the day, relationships are the result of shared experience.
Yep.
When you actually think about it, when you boil it down to, it's that shared experience. Is that person there for you? You know, your greatest relationships with people is people that you know, if you broke down on the M1 and you rang them, they'd do everything they can to come and help you. That's what relationships are about. And though that's not how maybe a 1-year-old sees it, they know that if they cry and cry and cry, that you're going to be there for them. And it always sort of comes back to me, the work on Emmy Pickler.
Yeah.
And how she says like how important it is to be present and in the moment. And I think as a society, that's getting less and less and less. I mean, you can buy baby things now. Well, when you're feeding your baby, you can put your iPhone into it so that when you're feeding your baby, you can still scroll on Instagram. And like, how crazy is that? That's like the most intimate moment. Like, I don't know, but I'm not ever going to be a mother. But I imagine that's like the most intimate moment you can have with your child when you're breastfeeding. And to then place...
Any type of feeding.
But to place then TikTok, it's like a barrier between you. To me, just seems absolutely insane. Maybe I'm wrong, and I think it's about, Pickler always talks about the importance of slowing down, being in the moment with that child and really delivering like a really high level of care. And I get it with ratios and stress of the work environment, that becomes very difficult. But I think if it's at the forefront of your mind and your practice as a whole, you're probably going to do a lot more than if it's not, if that makes sense.
It's interesting. We had, I was in one of our baby rooms the other day and we only had 2 babies awake, we had 14 in total. The others were all asleep.
I tell you what, babies live a life luxury.
Oh, I know. But there was these 2 awake and they're twins.
Right.
It was time for their bottles. And me and another practitioner. So we were one-on-one with these babies. And oh my goodness, there's nothing, the sound of a baby giggling is just nothing, because member of staff made the bottles. I had the 2 of them, sat down, she brought the bottles over. And it was just the most natural thing because there was no distraction. And obviously I know that was like a very luxurious moment in a baby room, don't get me wrong, because 1 to 3 is normally a thing. But one of the girls was having lunch. Someone was in the sleep room with the others, dealing with, obviously doing her checks and things. And we were in the main room and we had 2 babies awake. And oh my goodness, like those are the moments where someone could have gone, right, okay, you feed those 2. I'm going to go and do this, this and this. I've got the time. And yes, we have to take advantage of those moments. But actually, in the moment, oh my goodness, we had 1 baby each. They were giggling. They were sharing a shared experience. Our siblings, I think I was doing 5 little ducks with a little duck puppet. And oh my goodness, it was just so lovely. And it's one of those moments where, right, no, we're going to be present in this moment with these babies and actually make this time of singing, feeding, playing peekaboo, giggling together a positive and slow down and really be in the moment. And that's how relationships are built in a setting, because you have to take advantage of being able to get things done. Of course you do. But you have to take advantage of stopping and thinking, no, what is the most important thing right now?
It's the most expensive commodity in the world is time.
Yeah.
Like time is the most precious thing we have because it's such a finite resource. And it doesn't matter, you could be worth 18 billion pounds or whatever it is. you can't buy time. You can't extend your life.
No.
So finding...
And actually, this member of staff is pregnant. So she's about to have a little baby that, like, do you know what I mean? And we were chatting about that with the bed. It was just a really, really lovely moment. And it's kind of made me thought there, like, positive relationships don't just come with the children, it comes with adults as well.
Yeah.
And being in that moment, being able to chat with the babies, feed them, it was a nice bonding moment for me and the member of staff as well, because like you said, time was on our side. We were just enjoying that moment. So it was really good. And I think those are very rare occasions.
Luxury in the world of early.
Exactly. And I think it's those type of moments that we shouldn't take for granted. Because
I don't feel guilty either. I think some people could probably feel guilty for...
Yeah, no, I didn't.
No, but do you know what I mean? Like, you can very easily feel guilty for thinking, oh, I'm not actually working, or
oh yeah,
I'm not doing my job, or...
That's why I didn't even suggest going to do anything else, because I was like, no, this is what we do. This is why we're here. And the relationships and the positives that come out of it are far more important than somebody doing...
And the emails can wait.
Exactly.
You know, and the observations you're actually going to get from actually being in the moment far outweigh actually trying to write an observation there and then by getting them to do something else.
Exactly. So yeah, that was sort of our... in that moment, being present and being part of that day was really important. And I know I always link back to something that's happened, but I think it's a great way to bring it to reality, because we have these conversations, but actually being able to link it back to something that's really happened day to day, I think helps to prove what we're trying to talk about today.
And that's the perfect environment and a scenario. That doesn't happen all the time. That's
God, no. That's not a luxury.
Yeah.
No,
we're not saying that's what you have to achieve.
No.
And you won't achieve it all the time, but is it at the forefront of your practice and what you're trying to achieve?
We had 14 babies that morning. Like, the rest of the morning was not that calm. But it's when you get those moments of calm, how do you take advantage of them?
But also, for you to be present in the moment, it doesn't have to be calmful. Like, calmful, is that a word? It doesn't have to be calm.
No.
Like,
that's not what I meant, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
You can still be incredibly present or not there. Like, it's eye contact, and it's their little things.
It's playing with the children.
It's not engaging with a child, but actually trying to have a conversation with somebody else on the other side of the room about EastEnders last night. And I think that's the basics of it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's about actually being in the moment and treating... it always comes back to treating the children like human beings, because sometimes, I'm not saying we treat them like animals, but sometimes you can forget.
They have opinions too.
But also you can forget that if you were talking, like if I was talking to you and somebody was there and I was having a conversation with you, but I wasn't really focused on you, I was focused on them in a three-way conversation, it can come across as really rude. And if you treat a child like that, you know, they're not going to turn around and say, Miss So-and-so, you're actually being really rude. Can you give me eye contact and concentrate on me when I've got something to say?
Some of them
do you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Some of them get your face and they'll bring it back and be like, hello, I'm talking to you.
But that must be really frustrating as a child to be talking to an adult, but also feel like...
being completely ignored.
Yeah, you're not as worthwhile. Because, I mean, you run into frustrations like that all the time as you get older. You can get to your first job at the age of 18 and you're seen as lesser than other people because they've got 20 years experience on you.
Yeah.
It's the same for a child. They just don't have the ability to understand it or feed back to you how they feel.
So that leads us on to boundaries. What did I call them? Barriers.
Blockages.
Barriers and pitfalls as to what...
I think the first one what I wanted to talk about was overprotection. Because you often see this from parenting more than necessarily early years. But overprotection, and especially then when you break into talking about risky play, developing physically, being presented with negative experiences like we touched upon earlier, and actually being given the opportunity to go through those negative. Yeah. I always caveat with, obviously I'm not expecting the child to be put into a circumstances where they're in like severe, great danger. Obviously, but in this day and age that sort of needs to be said. Because sometimes people will feed back to you like, oh, but what happens if they get a knife? Well, obviously I'm not condoning a 4-year-old picking up a knife somehow, shape or form. But things like woodwork sort of died out of early years because they can't hammer. What happens if they hammer their finger? Well,
it will hurt.
It'll really hurt, and it might do some damage to the finger, but I guarantee you the second time they do it,
they'll make sure the thumb's out the way.
They'll do a better job. And if they don't, then we'll probably look into it. But it's things like that, and it's experiences like that. Now, we live in a PC world now where risk assessments, blah, 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 really important. I get it, and I'm not down in it, but it's gone to a point now where it's not worth it as a business, exposing them almost to these risks, or even anything close to a risk because of the paperwork and everything involved with it, and it's just not worth it. But in reality, it is worth it. And in reality, what you learn from being presented with a challenge, even something as simple as climbing a tree, which we often talk about, one, it's having the confidence to then go and do that.
Yeah.
Two, it's the amount of strategic thinking that a child has to do to figure out where to place its limbs, what do I do next? Like, you're not physically just working out. Yeah, you're not, they tend to figure that out once they get to the top or panic. But it's the physical workout they get in, they're developing so many muscles in their body. It's the cognitive, strategic, memory, what did I do last time? Like, there's so much involved. Yeah. And it's not just the extreme of climbing a tree. It's being presented with glass or other materials. Okay, if I lob this cup across the room, because it's made out of red plastic, it's just going to bounce and there's no consequences to it. But if I launch this cup, for example, which is made out of glass, whatever it might be, it is going to break.
Yeah.
And it's learning about outcomes of things. Yeah. And there's so many other examples where you could talk about where overprotection shackles children's development. And it can then also bleed into like your relationships. Whereas if you don't fully trust children, you don't believe in what they can achieve, you don't believe really in what they can do.
Yeah.
Because preschoolers, for example, are capable of so much if you give them the opportunity.
Oh, gotcha.
But if you shackle them too much, you overprotect them too much, limit down the resource what they have, eventually they get bored, then it becomes bad behaviour. We determine them to be poorly behaved children. And you can see where I'm going with this. There's a bit of a spiral, a bit of a snowballing effect. Whereas really, if we believed in them and have confidence and we have these relationships, some of them might be a nightmare, but in the grand scheme of things, there's a lot of reward from that.
No, you're right. I think you've covered all of those points in one,
No. No, because you've also got a big one of negative modelling. We've talked about modelling a lot, but negative modelling, as we've touched upon, is a huge one.
Yeah, like I say, eye rolling. Kids, where do you think kids eye roll from? They've learnt that from somebody. When kids swear, it's the funniest thing and everyone giggles at it. But when a child tells you to fuck off, they've learnt that from somebody.
I honestly think most poor behaviour that children learn in that respect comes from road rage. I'm convinced of it.
Potentially, yeah.
I think most of it comes from road rage.
Yeah. If a child has suffered some form of abuse, that's going to impact the ability to build positive relationships because they're just not going to trust the people around them. They're going to think that that's the norm. They're going to think that that's how you treat people. I hate to think about it. So it just doesn't help.
ACEs is a very real thing, and the effect it has on the brain chemically and also structurally is huge. And that's a whole nother conversation for another day, I think. But the other one I wanted to talk about as well was inconsistent discipline.
Yes.
Because inconsistency, everybody hates inconsistency in any way, shape or form. And especially if you think about yourself in your job role. If one day you do something and you're praised for it, and the next day you do it, and the next day you do it, and then the next day you get pulled up for doing exactly the same thing.
You're going to be questioning.
Hang on a second. Or even inconsistency of if you're 5 minutes late, you get a verbal warning. If Susan's 10 minutes late because she's mates with the boss, it's overlooked. Yeah. Again, inconsistency. And it's the same with the children. If you set boundaries in a certain way, it applies to everyone, not just you, the group of children, but not your favourite, if that makes sense. And having favourites and bits and pieces like that, naturally, we all develop relationships with people in different ways, and you naturally are warmer to other people. It's just the chemical of your brain. It's the way the world works. But as professionals, you can't.
No. I think I will always say that there is children that you bond with in different ways than other children, and you do naturally, I wouldn't say have favourites, but you do naturally bond with children and families differently. And the same with the children. The children have favourite teachers. The children have favourite educators. Absolutely. And parents pick up on that and they celebrate that. So I think it's really difficult to tell adults that you can't have favourites because naturally you do, but there's the way that you present yourself in a professionalist way to make sure that nobody feels excluded or nobody feels like not a favourite. Does that make sense?
Do you know what? From my memory of primary school, my favourite teacher was my teacher I had in year 5. And it's not because she was the nicest. It's not because I developed the warmest relationship with her, but actually probably much the opposite. But she was firm and she was fair. So you really knew where you stood. And in primary school, it was the first teacher that we actually had that was firm and fair. All the others were a bit wishy-washy. And then when they got really angry, there was that burst of where did that
come from?
Yeah, and as a child, you push it, you get away with it, and then boom, she explodes. that's the worst form of
I remember a
modelling.
teacher at secondary school. She was called Miss Christopher. I don't know if I'm allowed to say. There'll be loads of them, won't there? So it's fun. But she was a maths teacher and my sister's maths teacher. And my sister talked about her, but there was a reputation that she was really strict. I didn't care, apparently, at year 7. And I walked up to her in the maths block and was like, hello, you know my sister. And she was like, why is this year 7 talking to me? Like, what is going on? And I just remember from that point, I had only had the information really from my sister, who really liked her and got on really well with her, because you knew exactly where you stood with her.
Yeah.
Like, she didn't teach year 7s because she didn't like the immaturity of year 7s. Like, she just couldn't get on with year 7s. So if you were in year 7, you never saw her. Whereas I took myself out of my way to say hello to her because I had the positive from my sister.
Yeah.
And from that moment, I think she taught me later on, I can't remember, I just had a really good relationship with her because I think she then knew where she stood with me. Like, oh, okay, she's not going to give up. No, she's not scared. And I knew where I stood with her. Like, no, you don't get on her wrong side. You respect what she does. And then that's it. And I remember that being from her. She was, And you either got on with her or you didn't, but she had like a zero tolerance.
Yeah.
Like,
I always think the worst is, especially when you go to secondary schools, those teachers used to try and be friends with people. You know, they used to try and be friends with, and they always seem to want to try and be friends with like the naughty kids in class. And it's like, oh, this kid flips a desk and then like rages out, leaves the classroom, and then later on you chummy with him. It's like, no, he's just massively disrespectful for you.
Exactly, yeah.
And like, you need to set boundaries in place because everybody else in the class misses out because we've just spent 10 minutes dealing with, I don't know, Dave in the back.
They said over.
Yeah, like, but anyway.
But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's the inconsistency of it leaves you feeling a bit unnervy.
Yeah.
Because you don't know and you're anxious. Whereas like we've said about those teachers we remember, because you knew exactly where you stood. If you acted like an idiot, there's going to be consequences to it. If you just knuckle down and get on with things.
But you can even extrapolate that into like your actual relationships and as adults, and like things like two-facedness.
Yeah.
It just breaks down relationships because if you think, oh, if I say this to this individual, even though we get on really well, but it's then going to get back to someone else, and so you just think, oh, it's just not worth the second guessing. And relationships, we talked about earlier being positive experiences, and they're created through those experiences that we share. Another massive aspect of it is respect. Respect, it all starts with that respect. And if you want to develop that respect, actually having strong boundaries in place and so people know where they stand and being consistent with it is huge. And especially with children when they're trying to understand where they sit in it. Yeah,
they do. Yeah, they always try and push those boundaries.
And they'll learn, like we said, socially from others. They'll see what happens to others. So if little Timmy's always getting away with something, but I'm getting pulled up on it constantly, you're going to be like, come on now. And that will reflect your relationship. Yeah. The last point I wanted to talk about, because we've got loads on this, but the last one I wanted to talk about was not focusing too much on achievement.
Yeah, I think that's a massive one because when children feel that pressure to achieve, and this does link to early years, but I think it is more so as children develop through primary school, maybe secondary.
And they start to become more of a number than an individual.
And I think that when children have that pressure of, no, you will score a goal in your football match. You will, like that pressure can overtake and the expectation of them, and then you don't have it because you don't want to face someone when you know you failed.
Yeah.
Whereas if a child knows that it doesn't matter as long as they've tried their best, then that builds that positive relationship. I saw a video of parents trying to teach their child how to jump.
Oh, right.
So cute. And
just jump like.
Just jump.
Jump in the air. Okay.
Yeah, and he couldn't do it, but they were cheering him on for trying, and he was so happy. He was so proud of himself.
When you say he can do it, was he just not leaving the floor?
Yeah. So he just kind of was like, and he moved his head and copied Dad. Yeah, he tried to copy Dad. I put it under 2.
Oh, right. Okay.
Like, like literally learning to jump. Right. Like brand new information to him. Like trusting your body to leave the floor is probably quite a big thing.
It's funny, isn't it? Imagine if you could remember all this.
I know.
Imagine if you could remember the first time you figured out how to jump and walk.
But I think there was not one moment where either parent was like, oh, no, try again. But that is the start of that expectations of achievement.
Yeah.
Whereas they were all smiling and giggling and clapping along like, yeah, good job, like, keep going.
I would say though, I would draw a line because I personally hate, when you go to play like a football match or something and everyone gets like a trophy for like participation.
I'm not saying that.
I know you're not, but like that for me is the line.
I'm saying you try your best, and if you don't succeed, you try again.
Yeah.
So yes, that's where you learn disappointment though, but you learn it through comfort of those people you're closest to.
It's promoting positive relationships through supporting people, being empathetic, all those things that we've already talked about, as opposed to fixating on the final outcome.
Exactly. And then when a child is so fixated on that final outcome and they get so anxious about
anxiety.
Stress comes from it, they get worried, they don't know how to tell you, they feel ashamed and all those things. And
it breaks that relationship down.
Yeah, and that's not the positive relationships we want children to have, or the positive, we want them, to have positive images of themselves.
And it goes, but we can relate it back to early years, because I think sometimes when you talk about tick listing, and you talk about trying to get children to achieve certain milestones along education, you can sometimes get too fixated on the child and what they are doing in terms of hitting milestones and forgetting the individual. And I think that's such a big thing, because sometimes context is king with everything, and especially in education. Like, context is the most important thing. There's always a why behind it somewhere along the line, whether that's seen as a child being deemed as naughty. There'll be a why somewhere.
Yeah.
There'll be a why when it comes to them learning how to do things, like physically. Like I say, biologically, we're not all born the same. Experience then has a massive impact on how children come up and develop.
You're right.
Yeah, hopefully. Okay, I think we've
covered a lot.
I think we've covered a lot. I think we've managed to
for you
summarise
to talk about in your class as well, so that's good.
Yeah, we've got a lot to dive into it more, because we can explore these strands more. And probably what I'll do in the class is explore the strands more. There's lots we didn't actually go into on this. And then it's also looking at how we can embed and change our practice in order to drive this more, and how we can do certain things and certain strategies behind building positive relationships.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't just happen by luck. And it's not all about just being there and cuddling children. I think that perception can sometimes get a bit warped.
Yeah.
Often when I talked about co-regulation isn't about being a bodyguard and protecting children and making sure they never suffer upset, or like we talked about anxiety. Those emotions and feelings have to be felt.
Yeah.
Children have to learn to understand them, to be able to have the emotional literature and language around it, to be able to talk about feelings.
Yeah.
And the same with education as well. They have to be able to talk about it and how they're struggling, and then we have to show them examples of empathy. And so it's not just a case of building positive relationships through cuddles and kisses and being there. Yeah. It's actually being there when it matters the most in moments of difficultness, I would say. Yeah.
No, I agree completely.
Cool.
Yeah, I think we're done.
I think we are too. And we are going to do motivation next week. I know we sort of touched upon that, didn't we? Last episode, so that was coming next. We will do that next time around.
We will.
Motivation.
We will. We'll get that done before next week.
We will indeed.
So I think that's it from us. If you've got any comments, leave them below. Give us a comment or a rating on any of your podcast platforms. We appreciate
there's some really nice ones on Spotify recently, haven't we?
Yeah, so we really appreciate those. So yeah.
Yeah, the reviews and like comments on iTunes and Spotify really help, because it sort of pushes the podcast up in the
category
sphere of podcasts, and within this category, so it helps more people, more eyeballs, and just make the conversation, the community bigger, really.
Yeah, exactly that. So we'll leave you on that. Have a lovely week, and we will see you in the next one.
Ciao.
Bye.